orderly exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.
This time around, we'll be looking at what the Asian Development Bank is doing to ease food crisis in Asia. Now, due to the disruption that happened owing to the Russia-Ukraine invasion, food supplies in many countries have been affected. And so to ease this, Asian Development Bank in 2022 committed $14 billion. It's to run for a 3-year period, which is 2022 to 2025, easing food supply in Asia. Let's look at what that has produced over the years, talking about from 2022 until 2024. And there's still one more year left in that plan, which is 2025. And what's there to learn for other countries in terms of ensuring food security? Joining us to talk about this morning would be guest Joel Wamba, who is Director Arzikin Noma. Good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning, Blessing. Thank you for having me.
It's our pleasure. Let's talk about food security now. So in 2022, the Asian Development Bank committed $14 billion to aid food supply in Asia. Now, this is 2 years into the plan. There's still one more year left, 2025. Let's take a look at what that has produced for Asia.
All right. I think it's beautiful to know that there's a lot of similarity. I want to begin this way to say that there's a lot of similarity between Africa and Asia in terms of poverty. There's a very high level of similarity. But in the early 80s, Asia had shown that they became more pragmatic than we have even today in Africa, because they viewed their problem and then began to concentrate on how to solve that problem. They were true to themselves. And that has helped Asia completely, right? They became the food basket of the world at the point, competing side by side with America in terms of production of grains, and also when it comes to some cereals with Europe. But over the time, obviously, because of international trade and comparative advantage, Asia began to get into the space of tech, which you find around Hong Kong. So, there was just a lot happening there. So there was a massive migration from agriculture into tech. Somehow you start hearing things like Toyota, Hyundai, just everywhere, And so what they did is, fine, we've got your technology, remain with your food, and let's see how this works for everyone. Now, in the space of time, a number of things happened, which the hype of them, one of them was the Russia-Ukraine war, and there was a lot because two nations began to fight, and obviously there's the Asian tigers. The head of that is China, right? And China seems to be by the side of Russia, and America seems to be by the side of Ukraine. So it means that if part of Asia succeeds or is doing extremely well, US looks like it's against the US, and if part of the US is doing well, it looks like Russia is winning. So obviously that affected a lot, and a number of those battles affected ships at the Red Sea and all of that. But as pragmatic, as we have known them since the early 80s, Asia obviously went back and looked at themselves and said, hey, if we continue this, we're about to die, because we'll all be living and there will be no enough food. Yes, we'll have the tech, but there won't be food. And so that brought about their bank, their development bank, just like we have the African Development Bank, and checked it and said, okay, fine, we realize that these are the issues, right? And they began to go into because some of those crops that were dependent heavily from Russia and Ukraine, majorly is wheat, because of their cold weather. Now wheat does extremely well during the cold season. And such pragmatic approach and realistic drive made that they had to come and start developing seeds that can do the same crop like wheat, right? That can do well in their hot, a little temperate region. And obviously today the demand for wheat from Russia and Ukraine is dropping. The other thing also, it's also the inorganic fertilizer, and right now where the world is driving into is inorganic fertilizer. So there's a lot happening from that side, even in terms of storage. There's a massive, one of the best storage facilities coming from the Philippines in the world, where you don't even have to need any chemical to store, and it's called the Cocoon Technology. There is an American company, but have their production site in Ukraine, and the raw material comes from places like India. It's an Israeli technology, but India produces the raw material, and they produce the complete set of that from Philippines. And one of the other things that they've done is that they took smaller groups of people. So what are their problem? and find very innovative ways to bring inputs. While they work on the seed type. This today. Russia is not. I mean, Russia is not. Sorry to say, Asia is not going to die because Russia and Ukraine are fighting. Not at all, right? Because this has helped them a lot. There's been a massive improvement. I love them, right? Because they've been very pragmatic and they view things pragmatically. They knew that corruption was part of their problem, and you hear news from time to time. Their past leaders, I think there's the wife of one of the former leaders who was recently jailed for corruption that happened long when her husband was still alive and even ruled. So this for me is why I like Asia. So it has helped them. And by 2025, to hell with Russia and Ukraine. If you get back, fine. It's an extra advantage for us to receive from you because we'll beat down the price. And I'll also say this, right? You're asking what that has produced. Sometime 2 months ago, we saw that Russia exported massive wheat into Africa. And in Nigeria, we decided Nigeria, Niger, right? And why is this happening? Because the demand coming, they have excess. And the demand coming from the Asian world is dropping because they are beginning to see their investment yield results. Now, this is what it has produced in Asia, and I believe that other continents and other countries will learn, just like this rightly said. Thank you.
All right, glad to have you join us once again.
Thank you.
Now, looking at the peculiarity of this investment, the Asian Development Bank for the last 2 years have decided to invest about $14 billion, to tackling the issue of food crisis in that region. I would like you to talk to us about the peculiarity of this investment and how it can be replicated in Africa.
Okay, thank you. And I mean, just like I said, their pragmatic nature makes that they are very specific with issues, and then they prioritize their issues. They realize that there are a couple of issues that needs to be addressed, and the financing was geared towards solving the specific issues. One of them was input supply. Beyond the grain that comes from Russia and Ukraine, Russia is massive when it comes to energy, oil. So they have what is needed to produce a lot of the chemicals we have, like urea. Now, that obviously was going to affect, even if Asia develops the right seed, they won't have the prerequisite fertilizer, right? So there was a massive investment into chemicals, fertilizer to be precise, right? That fertilization, obviously, fertilizer, inorganic and organic fertilizer, has helped them a lot because these fertilizers are available at the right time and when farmers need them, which is key, which is very key. Also, on the seed, why did they go into seed production? Because they needed to increase the yield per hectare, which is, unfortunately, where I see it in my country, Nigeria today, we have that problem. Yes, people are farming more, but yes, these guys went majorly specifically after the inputs, right? They also went into outputs, dealing with what would increase and improve our yield because they're having a population blue everywhere. Asia is the most populated continent. Now, that seed also trying to improve the yield potential was a major aspect that investment focused on. There was also the issue of distribution. So you realize that they have locations that have excess, and in the season of harvest, they experience growth. Now that growth makes that you are wasting goods, food that other part of the continent needs. So they improved on their system of distribution that made that places that have growth, there was a system to take, store for as long as possible, and then distribute to places that have need, just to stabilize a lot of this crisis, or else people will start eating humans. Humans will be eating humans, right? I think these are quite a number of areas that the intervention was very focused on. And like I said, also organic. They went very organic. Look for what makes for sustainability. If we produce today, we are okay today. I hope we still have the opportunity to produce similar in the next 50 years. So we don't save this generation for the next 10 years. And then 20 years after, our children don't even have what can produce, right? The content, the texture and structure of the soil is so bad that it cannot help anything. Water has never been an issue, but even at that, they also invested into the water management system. Very, very, very strategic. Yeah, I think these are a few I just want to mention on this call of what they invested into. Thank you.
All right, let's take a look at some of the things that the ADB invested in and is planning to do to ensure food security for Asia. One of them is the supply of fertilizers for farmers in the short term, and in the other is to encourage sustainable farming practices to ensure that there is food availability. You've been talking about some of these sustainable farming practices. Could you elaborate on that more, particularly as Asia also has challenge because of the effect of climate change, and what can be learned by other countries, particularly African countries, from what they're doing to ensure food security?
All right. Thank you, Blessing. So what Asia had done, like you spoke about, and your question was more on sustainability. I think it's important to mention that sustainability is not just having for the now. I mean, in agriculture, we say you produce for the now, and you also have potential to produce for the future. So don't produce for the now. Don't milk the cattle and the cattle dies. At the end of the day, the future is it's damaged. So sustainability is how do we produce now and also ensure that we're able to produce in the future. Now that is one thing Asia had done over the years, though it looks like an emergency intervention to keep us afloat until this war is over. But in the midst of that, they went into organic system, ensuring that while we produce, the soil structure and soil texture still remains. The organic matter still remains. You know, they as much as they needed to improve the yield, they ensure that it's still very, very organic. The water system is not completely depleted. Now, because of the extreme weather condition, we all know what Asia stands for. Tomorrow you hear of typhoon and extreme flood and all of that. So now, one of the things you do for the soil to still remain is if the soil structure is together and structure and texture, what happens in the midst of extreme weather condition, they still stay compacted. So yes, you lose the portion, but you won't lose all of the portion. Now that portion remaining can then still be farmed on, right? It can then still be propagated. These are quite a number of things that they've done. Now, in terms of fertilizer, like you mentioned, which is the input, what they've done is, like I said, they moved from the inorganic. In Africa, we're still very highly dependent on inorganic, while these guys have moved more into the organic. Oh, we still use it and even get, I mean, regenerative agriculture is very heavy in the Asian world. It's now that we're beginning to see that coming into Africa a bit. I was in Kenya sometime last year, and I was excited seeing that, Kenya has picked up, even in the hinterlands, they picked up that knowledge and everywhere. So Asia has also done this to ensure that, when we produce and massively get what we want in this current 2, 3, 5, 10 years, the structure even gets better and better and better and better. And also the knowledge, the technical know-how of running perfect intercropping and mixed cropping, right? Make that this crop has seasons. So you don't do cereal for the next 10 years, right? You have cereal, legumes, and allowed to follow. So that level, and I'm glad because it was not at the level of just the private sector. There was a lot that happened even from the development bank involving key stakeholders and also the private sector. So that made that we all agree and say, this place has been found for the past 2 years. We leave it to follow, just so that we don't lose it, right? And very, like I spoke about, also the water management. You know that one of their major problems is flood, right? And they began to make very consistent plan towards managing that flood. So these are things that are not just for the now; they are also things for the future. And I bet you soon. And there are also other technologies that we begin to see. I'm sure you must have stumbled on a little snippets, videos from this Asian world where they're beginning to really develop strongly on hydroponics, right? What's the source of land? If we do not have the conventional land that God gave us, how else can we produce without that physical land? So we see them making from dungs and all of that. That's the organic, right? Using animal dungs and then putting them in bags, and you see massive potatoes coming out. They also went into some development of small machinery that make that the soil structure is not heavily destroyed by the big tractors. However, they are able to achieve a lot that they need to achieve with time. And then bringing in every key stakeholder that needs to be. Now, this is both for the present moment of Asia and the future. I can tell you that with the food crisis coming, despite the population burst in Asia, they will survive. They will. Yeah.
All right, interesting to know that they will survive. But let's look at the peculiarity of this investment in the area of food production and distribution, and also the investment in logistics and also access to rural financing. Talk to us about the significance of these specifics and how it's also going to help in tackling food crisis globally, if prioritized.
All right. So I'll speak. I'll just pick that one after the other, right? So I'll speak about production. Now, these guys have tried, right? Now, in terms of production, what they've done is, oh, we know that this seed gives us 8 metric tons per hectare wheat before this crisis. What they've done is, oh, how then do we improve that from 6 to 8 metric tons to 15 metric tons for the same hectare size? They are not there yet, but I can tell you they've improved massively. They are between 12 and 14 metric tons per hectare. So that's what has happened in terms of production. They've not just gone to say, oh, let's improve production and let's open another 3 million hectare land for people to farm. Maybe we find a way to fill the ocean and all of that. And no. Oh, fine. We know that we are in serious trouble. I mean, we have a disadvantage and we need to work on that disadvantage. And that disadvantage is land, extreme weather conditions. I mean, climate issue, right? And just putting them in the bucket. And so what they've done in terms of production is, okay, how do we make use of this resource we have to produce the outputs that we need? And in terms of production, we really worked on improving yield per hectare. So the same hectare size is being farmed, right? But the yield that is being produced is almost at 50% more than what was produced across Asia, right? But yeah, they still have a lot of work to do. I mean, they take it one point at a time, and I think I love their system of M&E, monitoring and evaluation. So they are very true to themselves. Governments of different Asian nations are not just putting papers and looking like, oh yeah, this is what we've achieved for the book. But no. You see it in the life of the people. You see it in the life of the people. And I think these are things that they've done in terms of production. Now, when it comes to do with distribution, the whole limitation, I'm glad a lot of the Asian nations see themselves as one right now. All right. Yes, we still have the whole US-China issue. So you have some who aligns more with US and some who aligns more with China. For instance, China and India, there was a time where there seems to be some good relationship between China and India, and all of a sudden, US went to India and then did some stuff, and then there was a border crisis. So that border crisis meant that you couldn't enter, though their boundary villages, right? But you couldn't enter a China territory, neither could you enter an Indian territory. Now, with that, yes, you still have those little frictions. Maybe they will be there for only God knows. Maybe that's why we're humans. But a larger chunk of them have seen themselves as brothers, right? And they're beginning to, you know what? It's not just you alone, it's everyone here. Also, those free trade zone, the port duties and importation, for instance, when you get to Singapore, let me share this on the Philippines, right? It will interest you to know why a lot of manufacturing companies are going to the Philippines. It's majorly because of their ports and their tax system. So they do everything to encourage this production and movement of what you have. So imagine that you're not going to spend your entire fortune moving outputs or inputs like fertilizer and grains from Thailand, Malaysia to Singapore or the Philippines, right? Like you when you go to other continents, because we see ourselves as enemies, right? Or somehow we must make money from this. Now they've literally been able to close this boundary issue and work as one. So that is, once you are within Asia, we identify ourselves as one, right? And how do we then work for our common good? This has helped the distribution system. So it doesn't cost much to move stuff from Asia to Asia. And one of the other things that they've done in terms of this distribution is that everybody they put together standard that every Asian country, right, within that agreement, stakeholder within that system of agreement, have upheld. So the standard of goods that you eat in China, of grains or food you eat in China, if you cross over to South Korea, right, is the same standard that is being adhered. So that level of sincerity, where if I test my grain, I see, oh, the aflatoxin is less than 2 parts per billion. If I move from China and get to North Korea, or I get to Thailand, and I check what you are accepting, it's going to be 2 parts per billion, right? And we all accepted to use the same technology like the AflaSafe and all of that, So I think this has helped Asia continent. I mean, this investment is working. So that makes that they could trust themselves and say, oh, we know that we trust your standards. And so move it from your country to my country. I won't have to do those extra checks again. Right. So this has aided distribution a lot. So I think that I'll just highlight this too. Thank you.
Look at what the ADB has done, what it will continue to do until 2025, because this is a 3-year plan. Is there anything that the African Development Bank can learn in terms of the approach that they are using to tackle food crisis in Asia?
Okay, thank you, Bessie. Um, so it's amazing to see. There's been a lot of transformation since Akinwumi became the leader of the African Development Bank. We've seen a lot of focus, strategic and goal-oriented programs across Africa through the African Development Bank. That has led into a lot of improvements, and we cannot deny we're not where we used to be, but we're also not where we should be. If we consider what the ADB has done and then what can the AFDB learn, I think the ADB is trying to catch up. Well, usually we're playing catch up, right? We do not lead it right now. We're playing catch up. But even in that catch up, um, there's a lot. There's a lot. Unfortunately, we have. It looks like this the split or the percentage of such interventions that come from the African Development Bank is not dealing with the root cause issues, right? It literally seems to be dealing with the fruits, right? The effects. So yes, the effect can be done, and we could solve it. So, for instance, there's hunger, there's crisis, food crisis. AFDB can, okay, you know what? Let's import foods from America and all of that, and split and give it to the state governors or presidents of nations and give your people food, let them eat, right? But yes, when they finish eating, that food is going to be done. They'll be done eating that food in 2 weeks. What then happens? Yes, I understand the whole psychology behind it. Is that when they have food to eat for 1 month, it's expected that they get energy and go back to farm and prepare for the future. But unfortunately, people have to be led. Not everyone is a leader. I mean, amazingly, it's one person has to lead a group, right? So, and leadership is not just sitting in a position; it's leading by thought, right? Influencing people to do the right things. And I think if AFDB gets into that place, it will help us. Today, we're giving people food to eat, but after they finish eating and they don't produce for the next period, what then happens, right? So we seem to have massive interventions into not into production, not improving and increasing yield. For instance, irrigation, even on yield potential per hectare, right? It's not what it's just taking 5, 10, 15% of that intervention. But we see interventions into processing facilities and all of that. But yes, it's beautiful, but what are you going to process when the people are not producing? It will amaze you to see that the ADB, right, intervention has up 80-90% of that was dealing with specific issues, even down to irrigation, like we had mentioned, right? But here we have it mentioned, but the percentage of such intervention driven like that is very minimal. Oh yes, we're trying to improve this, but we're giving people food. Yes, when they finish eating, they expect, and amazingly, we have the herd mentality. If you lead me to eat, I expect you to keep leading me to eat. Right? This is the largest life psychology of the African people. Something just keep giving me and I'm okay. Let me just be sleeping until I die. And that has to change, right? And one of the ways that has to change is that there has to be intervention that drives people into production, move them to the farm. And I understand that because we are beginning to have a very large population of the youth. And like I always say, as our system does not move by mastery anymore, we move by it's like, how would I put it now? I'm looking for the right word. Everybody just moves. It's the head mentality. Oh, today we saw that if you buy gold, you are going to make 2 million because it's largely youth, over 50% youth. Everybody wants to make quick money, and we all move to gold. And when you make the money, you don't have food. You will spend times 10 of that to get food. So look at the inflation and food where we are today and food security in Africa. It's a big problem. So yes, there's a lot to learn, and I think to cap it, I think we need to give the AFDB have to give a larger portion and percentage into concentration into production and improving the output right? And part of that is the fertilizer, the input, right? The kind of seed. And let's not just think, I mean, there's a lot coming from the AFTB, right? Intervention, but you see that some of this intervention, we're even trying to import seed. What happened in improving the technical know-how for us to improve and develop these seeds, this breeding, do this breeding within local talents to do it, right? But why must we depend? So tomorrow, if something happens and there's war between some African countries and the nations that we are supposed to get from, say, you know what, because you're not by me, I will not give you. You know, so I think there's a lot that the AFTV has to learn and maybe do, play the catch up and play it well, right? Don't play it as and then it looks like you're only catching up with ADB 20 years, 30 years after they've gone ahead. And no, that's not catch up anymore, you know. So I think these quite a number of things to learn. Thank you. Blessing.
All right, still talking about the lesson. One of the significant things that the Asian Development Bank has been doing the last 2 years is to provide access to rural financing, targeting farmers in the rural areas. Now, what should be the role of the African Development Bank, since that's a replica of that in Africa in this regard? How much of importance has been placed on access to rural financing, which is very critical for these farmers to engage in food production? What should be done by AFDB in this regard?
All right. I'll begin by talking about what have been done, and then I'll tell what then becomes the switch. How do we tweak this to achieve the results we need to achieve? First of all, AFDB have actually invested a lot directly into the smallholder farmers, and most of these smallholder farmers are in the rural area, right? So when we hear the concept of smallholder farmers, literally they're talking about intervention across the rural farmers, and quite a number of intervention and rural financing has happened, right? Some people have accessed grants and very low interest funds, credit facilities from the AFDB and other collaborators like the USAID. And they follow through on those, ensuring that it gets to the rural farmers. But what then becomes the issue? Most, I tell you, 85 of such intervention is coming into processing, storage, because we saw a book and then they said, oh, and I mean, proven, right? 33% of the grains that we produce in Africa is lost as post-harvest losses. So we're trying to capture 33%, right? And we cannot eliminate it, we can only reduce it. Maybe the target could be to reduce it to 15%, right, of those losses. And that's why they're getting into processing. Oh, why do we have to lose a lot of tomato? Why not process them into paste and all of that? The Dangote paste, Kenya, you have others coming. We have a lot of rice mill right now from the previous government, Nigerian government, for example, right? And a lot of rice mill are functioning. But we see what's happening to the price of rice. So processing now has been solved, but before, actually, it looks like we went ahead, a step ahead. You count one before you get to two. You don't go to two and come back to one, which is one of the things, like I said, that being sincere and very pragmatic. I don't know where we picked it and feel like, oh, we produce enough, just that we produce too much. And that's wrong. The yield potential of specific varieties we use, for instance, let me use maize, right? One of those varieties that was produced in Nigeria, right? A particular variety from the Institute of Agricultural Research, somewhere in Kaduna State in Zaria, right? It's called Samas 15 because we had the problem of strider and drought, and that variety could withstand strider and drought. And so it means that the farmer can, which is climate smart, right? Now, the yield potential of that was supposed to be between 3.5 metric ton to 6 metric ton per hectare. Unfortunately, when we give the farmers this same variety, the max and average that the farmers get is 15 metric ton. 1.5 metric ton, that's 15 bags, as against almost 50 bags. So it means that they are losing more than 200%. So why should I bother myself to try to save 33% when I should bother myself to improve the yield by 300%? If we improve the yield by 300%, it becomes self-sustaining. So it's basically what I'm trying to talk about. Yes, the AFDB has really done a lot of intervention, but I think the priority, the percentage, so just about 15% of their intervention goes directly into improving production. And about 85% goes into extension, knowledge, and processing specifically, I mean, majorly processing facilities and all of that. I think this, if we are able to tweak it, maybe we should change it and make it 85% into production, improving and increasing the yield. I always say this: about 70.8 million hectares of land is what is being farmed in Nigeria today, and out of that, we have less than 3 to 5% that is what is being used for irrigation. So we cannot even have an all year round farming when AGB is heavy on irrigation. So all year round they produce. So we, after the rain-fed season, we have a window of about 6 to 8 months, depending on the region you live in Nigeria, before you can be sure that more food are going to come. So when you harvest and whatever, you do the best you can to keep for the future. So it's literally survival of the fittest. So I think this, if we have this tweak, I think it will do us a lot of good. I think we'll be as good as the ADB. Yeah.
All right, talking about being as good as the ADB, one of the things you mentioned earlier was infrastructure, how they've been able to provide access for the agricultural areas to those who would need the agricultural produce. Let's come back to Nigeria, which you're already in, talking about what has been done, modifying some species of maize. So let's look at storage. Let's assume that 85% of funding from the AFDB is targeted at enhancing production. At the end of the day, where would that, where would the 85% of produce that has been enhanced be stored? Storage facilities and as well as value chain for agricultural produce in Nigeria. Can you speak to that quickly?
All right. Thanks, Blessing. Now, truth is, yes, when we do this, we're going to have growth, right? Which is what they're trying to run away from, and think that there's growth. But I'll tell you, storage, there are systems of storage that you don't need the people. For instance, how storage solved even from developed worlds, right? Like the American, right? I'll tell you, even the Russia and Ukraine we're speaking about, how does the government have this excess? You don't need the entirety of the storage in the hands of farmers. So we're supposed to have what I call a price control board, right, or commodity board, right? And I think that's where governance comes in, because if you create the enabling environment for production, then everybody produces and get the right output that ensures that first of all, for us to have excess in the market means that first our people are food secure, which is first the goal. Then the piece is, oh, what about food sustainability? It's where the government comes in and says, oh, you know what? Oh, these farmers now produce over 60 bags per hectare, an average 6 metric tons. We know that what they need is about 2 metric tons. So the government now makes plan to get 4 metric tons, which is 40 bags per hectare. And then that's where you charge the government, and the state government, the commodity board exists. At that point, the price is going to be low. You take from these farmers and keep there. It's from this point that you can also export and save other countries, African nations who are there. In Somalia, I mean, it's crazy. It's really crazy in Somalia. But other African nations cannot even help Somalia because we're all in Nigeria. We know what has happened to prices. Last week, a basket of tomato used to be, I mean, at harvest, right, which is in the north, right, between December and January, February, a basket of tomato in December went for as low as 12,000 naira. But as I speak to you, a basket of tomato here is about 100,000. In the southwest, in the south, is about 150,000. You know, so what has happened? Production. Yes, processing is good, but even the processing plant cannot work anymore. So I think first of all there has to be balance, and the balance is where governance comes in. Maybe some of those data, because no intervention comes without some kind of pre-data, right? In the planning phase, data comes in, and I think people who fill those questionnaires and those surveys really need to be truthful. And maybe when we bypass the system that sits on top of the rural farmers, right, the rural community, it will do us a lot of good where we can get the reality of this data and realize that, oh yes, so these guys, they produce, but they're always hungry. Because you also have the problem of the middlemen, and it has never been a problem, right? Storage has never been. It's just that you have the middlemen who are playing, and they're heavily there. But it's so bad now that even the middlemen do not have access to what they need to take. So let's deal with the first problem. Like I said, is priority. When we have enough, then we can be able to keep. You know, I'll give you a short story. I heard a joke, and I think a child did excellently. He came first in class, and the dad was like, "Oh, because you came first, I'm going to buy you a bicycle." And the dad just uttered that I'm going to get you a bicycle. And this boy literally just acted as though he was on the bicycle. I said, I'm going to ride it and ride it. And he was going close to a wall. And the father hit him on the head. I said, I've not bought you the bicycle, you're about to spoil it. So I think let's get it first. I'm sure, like they say, necessity is the mother of invention. Once we have it, invention will never be the problem. I mean, we have bright minds in Africa, very bright minds. Yeah, I think those are I'll speak about it. Thank you.
All right, let's wait for the bicycle to be bought before we worry about whether it will be rode properly or it will be spoiled.
Certainly.
All right, thank you very much, Joe Wamba, for talking with us this morning. We do hope that what the ADB is doing, in addition to what AFDB is doing in Africa and what the Bank of Agriculture and Nigerian government is doing to improve food security in Nigeria, a lot more will be done because food is one of the basic necessities, if not the most basic necessity of man. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Blessing and Femi.
All right, it's a wrap today. Thank you for watching. I am Blessing H. Let's sit tight and hope that at the end of the day, perhaps Labour and the federal government would have come to a conclusion regarding negotiations, and then business can continue as usual for those in Nigeria. Early exchange continues tomorrow, 8 a.m. West African time. I'm Blessing H. Stay with Sick News the rest of your day.
And don't forget, the conversation continues on our social media platform, looking at the face-off between the federal government and the labor movement. What's your advice for them? You can put that on our social media platform. You can also do a catch-up of this conversation on our YouTube page. Don't forget, Early Exchange returns tomorrow, and it will get bigger and better. I am Femi Ayodele. Thanks for watching. See you tomorrow.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.